Hello everyone, my name is Fuyishui Wang from Martino Center at MGH. I know you've already heard many great talks about EPI. In this final presentation, I'll discuss a relative new imaging technique, EPTI, and explore its potential to be used as a new readout technique. I have nothing to declare. This is an outline of this talk in which I'll give an introduction to what is EPTI and then talk about its application in functional MRI, high-resolution diffusion MRI, and microstructure imaging, as well as ultra-fast quantitative multi-parametric MRI. So I'll start by introducing EPTI. Conventional EPI acquires different phase encoding lines at different time point. So if we look at the acquisition in a KT space, it will show as a diagonal line in this space. And after combining the phase encoding lines at different time point, we get an EPI image. However, it suffers from distortion and blurring due to signal evolution across time, such as the field inhomogeneity leads to image distortion, the signal decay leads to image blurring, and the long readout limit the number of echoes we're able to obtain before the signal decays away. To reduce the distortion and blurring, we can use parallel imaging that undersampling the K-space and reduce effective echo spacing between neighboring data and therefore show as a steeper line in the KT space, corresponding to less phase and signal decay, therefore resulting less distortion and blurring. We can go to higher acceleration in K-space and achieve a much steeper line in KT space. However, higher acceleration in parallel imaging can lead to higher noise amplification, so the image will have less distortion but low SNR and more artifacts. Multi-shot EPI is an alternative method that uses a few shots to acquire the K-space to reduce the effective echo spacing. It can be combined with parallel imaging to achieve a steeper line in the KT space. However, it still cannot eliminate the distortion and blurring, and there's potential shot-to-shot phase variation artifacts without proper correction. The general idea here is that if we can get a steeper and steeper line in the KT space, we can get less and less distortion and blurring. So let's take a look back at the KT space. If we can fully sample all the data, and at each column, all the phase encoding lines will be acquired with the exact same B0 phase and signal magnitude. So we can take each columns out to generate an image without any distortion and blurring. We can also get multiple contrast images with a small t increment of an echo spacing. However, this requires hundreds of excitations and leading to impractically long acquisition time. So how to efficiently sample KT space? We want to design an acquisition method that can sample the KT space fast and efficiently with small number of shots or excitations, and also preserve the high sampling and readout efficiency of EPI with minimal dead time and short time interval. And also achieve this by using small gradient blips to minimize eddy current. EPTI achieve all these by exploiting the spatial temporal correlation in the KT space within the readout. It samples the KT space with high undersampling using a spatial temporal encoding pattern so that the neighboring data are spaced close in time with high temporal correlation, and also complementary along the phase encoding direction to better take advantage of the spatial information provided by the coils. Such strong spatial and temporal correlation will allow the undersampled data point in the KT space to be easily recovered. In addition, EPTI can be combined with SMS by extending the spatial temporal correlation to KZ together with the multi-band excitation to achieve shorter TR. This spatial temporal encoding pattern can be sampled in a multi-shot manner, where each shot covers a segment of the KT space with a zigzag trajectory that requires only small gradient blips and leads to small dead time and eddy current changes. With multiple segments covering a large KY dimension, the multi-shot EPTI is well suited for high spatial resolution imaging. For example, a 3-shot acquisition can provide high-quality data at 0.9 mm resolution. For dynamic imaging applications, single-shot acquisition might be preferred to achieve shorter volume TR and higher robustness to physiological noise. By optimizing the spatial temporal encoding and user trajectory that could reduce dead time and enhance temporal correlation, single-shot acquisition can be achieved in EPTI for standard spatial resolutions. To reconstruct the KT space, a bezier-informed grappa reconstruction was originally proposed. Different from conventional grappa, the kernel is applied in the KT space. So in addition to the spatial information of the coil sensitivity, the kernel also contains the bezier information along the time dimension within this small kernel. And the kernel is applied across the KT space to recover missing data point. Now, a subspace approach is used to improve reconstruction conditioning. And the general idea is to use signal evolution prior to improve the reconstruction conditioning. During the reconstruction, a number of subspace spaces are extracted that can accurately represent the signal evolution across echoes. Here's a spin echo signal evolution as an example. By estimating the coefficient of these subspace spaces instead of all individual echo images, we can reconstruct multi-echo data with reduced number of unknowns and improve reconstruction conditioning. So after reconstructing the KT space, a time series of distortion and blurring-free multi-contrast images can be generated at small t increment. So in EPTI, factors that would affect spatial temporal correlation can influence the reconstruction performance. For example, a higher acceleration or a very strong bezier could affect spatial temporal correlation and lead to potential noise amplification. We can optimize EPTI encoding to enhance spatial temporal correlation and improve reconstruction performance. Here we use single-shot EPTI as an example. A trajectory that minimizes echo spacing can lower G factor and reconstruction errors by enhancing the temporal correlation. Balancing the spatial and temporal acceleration to achieve optimal spatial temporal correlation can result in optimal reconstruction performance, or G factors. Either sacrificing too much of a temporal correlation or too much of a spatial correlation can result in suboptimal result. In addition, a KT partial Fourier sampling that help reduce some of the spatial encoding burden can help enhance spatial temporal correlation and result in improved performance. Here shows example distortion-free EPTI images with the same contour with the distortion-free reference, whereas conventional EPI has distortion and compressed structure. And here shows the example multi-contrast images resolving a gradient echo and spin echo EPTI acquisition from two slices. And you can see the dephasing area spreads out in the gradient echo with increases in TE and gradually refocused at the spin echo as expected. And this is an example to show the time resolve images can give a good representation of signal evolution across TEs. And the continuous readout used in EPTI can be used to fill out any dead time in the sequence and achieve high acquisition efficiency. And this readout can be plugged into various sequences to provide efficient multi-echo or multi-contrast imaging. To summarize, EPI generates an image from K-space samples evolving across time with accumulated imperfections leading to distortion and blurring. And parallel imaging or multi-shot EPI can address the problem by reducing the readout length or effective echo spacing, but it cannot fully address the problems. EPTI recognizes the strong spatial temporal correlation within readouts during image encoding process and exploits this correlation to replace the conventional image formation and resolve multi-echo images from the fully recovered spatial temporal data, making the images free from the effects of these imperfections. And this really turns the liability, which is the evolution of the MR signal with time, which yields geometric distortion or signal blurring, into an asset, providing a variety of benefits and unique features, such as distortion, blurring-free, multi-echo images with a wide range of TEs with small increment, as well as high readout efficiency. So now I've given an introduction to EPTI. I'll move on to talk about its application in functional MRI. EPTI can provide SNR-efficient, distortion-free, and multi-echo imaging. And a single-shot EPTI can provide high temporal resolution comparable to single-shot EPI at standard spatial resolution, whereas multi-shot EPTI can be highly suited for high spatial resolution applications at moderate temporal resolution. And they can be used for different applications. For example, single-shot EPTI can be used for standard or multi-echo fMRI for improved sensitivity or information content, whereas multi-shot EPTI can be useful for high-resolution fMRI to improve specificity by resolving pure contrast. And the sequence and the reconstruction are available. You can check out the dissemination website to play around with the sequence and reconstruction. I'll start by talking about single-shot EPTI for standard or multi-echo fMRI. The continuous readout of EPTI can lead to high SNR efficiency. For example, in conventional EPI, a shortened readout is often used to mitigate distortion blurring or is simply constrained by spatial resolution or matrix size. So to wait for the typical bold TE, there can be dead time in the sequence. Whereas in EPTI, flexible and continuous readout can be used with minimal dead time without cost of distortion blurring or being constrained by spatial resolution. This means that we can use an optimized readout length for better noise averaging and for SNR efficiency gain, as shown here. And now, with the single-shot acquisition, we can achieve comparable TR to single-shot EPI while achieving distortion-free imaging and recovering signal dropout by taking advantage of the early echo information. The distortion-free nature not only benefits anatomical integrity, but also improves temporal stability. This is because the distortion of conventional EPI can change dynamically due to field changes, such as those induced by respiration in a pace breathing and breath hold task. And this leads to image shift and geometric changes across the time series, and therefore signal fluctuations as shown in the carpet plot. And by addressing distortion, EPTI can mitigate these effects. And finally, as multi-echo fMRI has been shown by many previous studies to improve functional sensitivity and information content, and the EPTI's ability to resolve multi-echo images with a wide range of TEs as early as 3 milliseconds can provide a new acquisition tool for multi-echo fMRI. And the early echoes can be used to recover functional signals at short T2 star regions. So by combining with multi-echo ICA, we can further reduce physiological noise and improve the TSR efficiency of EPTI. And the core idea is that the bold signal change is TE dependent while the non-bold noise is not. So by looking at signal across different TEs, multi-echo ICA can separate signal and noise and further improve TSR efficiency and fMRI sensitivity. So now I've introduced to you the single-shot EPTI for standard multi-echo fMRI. I'll move on to talk about multi-shot EPTI for high-resolution fMRI, where EPTI has unique advantages. For high-resolution fMRI at ultra-high field, EPTI can address the stronger distortion at 70, as well as the dynamic distortion, which is also more prominent at 70. You can see the geometric changes across dynamics due to field drift that can be removed in EPTI acquisition. The strong B0 fluctuations will also cause shot-to-shot phase variations, very common in multi-shot acquisition, especially at ultra-high field. And in conventional interleave multi-shot EPI, this introduced aliasing artifact. In EPTI, because of its segmented encoding, it will only cause mild local smoothing, and phase correction can mitigate this effect, as well as the dynamic changes of this effect. Here shows the images without correction where signal fluctuation can be observed at 70, and after correction, these fluctuations can be significantly mitigated. A VFA-free multi-shot EPTI is developed recently that uses a fleet slice shot reordering and RF design to further improve the physiological induced temporal stability. You can check out the abstract. In addition to better image quality, EPTI can be used to improve functional specificity for high-resolution fMRI. The standard T2 star bolt has relatively low spatial specificity due to draining vein effect, and other contrasts such as T2 bolt can provide better specificity. And EPTI can be used to resolve pure T2 contrast with minimal T2 prime contamination compared to conventional spinacle EPI. From a cortical depth profiles, you can see that it can resolve the different contrasts across the spinacle readout, and with the pure spinacle in the middle shown in the green, achieves the minimal bias and highest specificity. And this ability to remove contrast contamination can be applied to other contrasts for high-resolution fMRI as well. So now I've shown you the EPTI's application in both standard and high-resolution fMRI. I want to quickly show you another two new advanced applications using EPTI readout related to functional MRI. And the first is to use both the dynamic phase and magnitude information in a velocity-encoded single-shot EPTI sequence to simultaneously obtain phase contrast, T2 star, T2, and S0 contrast. And from this information, it obtains the quantitative slow CSF flow mapping of the whole brain subarachnoid space as well as bold fMRI. And these information can be used to investigate relationship between the neuroactivity and the CSF flow. And you can check out the abstract here for more details. And another one is to capture the fast temporal dynamics occurring within the EPTI readout at millisecond scale. And for example, the original EPTI resolved the slow multi-echo signal evolution, such as the T2 star decay, that can be used for the standard applications as we talked about before. Well, as in this new acquisition where it aims to capture the fast temporal dynamics occurring within the readout. So we can get a time series of 2D images at millisecond scale temporal resolution within a single excitation. And for example, it can capture rapid electrical current induced field changes within 120 milliseconds, and this can be used to investigate ultra-fast functional dynamic processes of the brain. And you can check out the abstract here for more details. So with that, I want to move on to talk about high-resolution diffusion MRI and microstructure imaging using EPTI. Well, challenges persist in vivo diffusion MRI acquisition to achieve high spatial resolution or high B value microstructure imaging. For example, increasing the spatial resolution will lead to stronger distortion blurring of EPI, lower SNR due to the much smaller voxel size, and also the vulnerability to subject motion. Here's what we can get at 500 micron after averaging the data over an hour with a low SNR and severe artifacts. And similarly, for microstructure imaging or high B value diffusion MRI, the limited acquisition efficiency limit the SNR and the rich information content we're able to obtain. Here's the sequence of the standard spinacle EPI used in diffusion MRI, and the long EPI readout leads to dead time between 180 pulse and resulting in a long TE that affect SNR, and also image will have distortion blurring. Here, EPTI can help by achieving minimal TE by starting the readout right after the diffusion encoding and at the spinacle, and resolves a series of images across the readout. And this avoids the dead time between 90 and 180, and also the continuous readout with optimized readout length can be played or used to achieve optimized SNR efficiency, as we discussed before. And together, the TE reduction and optimized readout length can lead to around 30 to 40% higher SNR. And in diffusion MRI, instead of using a segmented encoding as in conventional EPTI, a self-navigated EPTI encoding is used instead. And this is because in diffusion MRI, the application of diffusion gradient will lead to very strong phase that need to be corrected properly. And this self-navigation ensures that each shot will acquire the central K-space for self-navigated shot-to-shot phase estimation and correction. And to recover the highly undersampled KT data, a phase-corrected subspace reconstruction is used to resolve distortion-free multi-echo diffusion images. And here shows that with phase correction in the reconstruction, it can effectively address the diffusion phase issues. And with this acquisition, we can now get SR-efficient, distortion-free images and without dynamic distortion, and this time dynamic distortion from diffusion gradient eddy currents. We can see that it limited the changes across different diffusion directions. And also we get a diffusion matrix across different TEs to look at diffusion relaxometry. So now we have EPTI to address the distortion and blurring, and also provide some SR efficiency gain. However, to achieve very high spatial resolution, the 30 to 40% SR gain is not enough. To address this, based on EPTI readout, Romer EPTI is developed to provide high SNR, motion-robust, distortion-free diffusion MRI. It employs the SR-efficient motion-robust thick slice acquisition with rotating view encoding, which encodes along slice and readout dimensions, with the distortion-free EPTI readout, which encodes along the phase encoding and TE dimensions. Specifically, it acquires thick slice volumes for better noise averaging, while acquiring different slice orientations to resolve isotropic high-resolution volumes. The implant encoding of these spatial encoded volumes is performed using distortion-free EPTI readout. So now, in addition to EPTI's 30 to 40% SNR gain, we now get an additional square root of around 15 SNR gain, which brings to the total of around 5 times higher SNR efficiency. So, in addition to the improved image quality and multi-echo information, why EPTI is important here? If we use an EPI readout here, in addition to the T2 or T2 star blurring along the phase encoding direction, the spatially encoded volumes will have geometric differences due to motion, eddy current, or field drift related field changes. So if we combine these spatially encoded volumes to reconstruct a high resolution volumes, it can cause additional detrimental blurring. EPTI is free from the T2 or T2 star blurring, but most importantly, its distortion-free feature avoids the geometric changes across the spatially encoded volumes and eliminates the sources of blurring due to combining the inconsistent geometry in reconstruction. Here shows resultant images from Romer EPTI, which gives you an example of what's possible using new acquisition techniques. And this is an in vivo mesoscale diffusion MRI at 500 micron isotropic resolution at 3T. You can see the high image quality that is distortion-free with minimized blurring or artifact. And you can see the spatial details and the fine scale structures revealed in these images. At this high spatial resolution, we can look at detailed fiber architecture such as U fibers at the gray-white boundary and those within the thin cortex. And after addressing distortion, motion can also be easily modeled and corrected for in the reconstruction, as can be shown here. A motion aware reconstruction can mitigate the blurring and motion artifacts. That's also very important for high-resolution imaging, as motion is almost inevitable during long diffusion scan. And moving to higher field strength, 7T diffusion MRI is much more challenging than 3T because the T2 is inherently shorter and there's SAR constraint at 7T. With the minimized T achieved by Romer EPTI, it can achieve high SNR for 7T and begins to take advantage of the SNR gain provided by higher field strength. and there's no extra star than EPI, and addresses distortion and blurring that's more prominent at 70. And here shows the acquisition that achieves in vivo 485 micron isotropic diffusion MRI at 70, revealing very fine scale structures such as a layered hippocampus and other structures. So now for microstructure imaging, similar to increasing spatial resolution, increasing B value will also lead to low signal or SNR, and the high SNR gain can also help here. And here, a single-shot EPTI is used to further improve the robustness to the stronger phase variation caused by stronger diffusion weighting at high B values and achieve good image quality. And also the high SNR gain from acquisition can help acquire rich diffusion information within shorter time frame for advanced diffusion modeling or analysis, such as time-dependent diffusion MRI. To sum up, EPTI can help address EPI's limitation for in vivo diffusion MRI towards higher spatial resolution or B values with improved image quality. Finally, I'll quickly go over some quantitative imaging applications. So resolving multi-contrast images across a continuous EPTI readout can closely track the signal evolution and highly suitable for quantitative imaging. To further increase the acquisition efficiency, the spatial temporal encoding can be extended from 2D to 3D to better take advantage of the coil sensitivity along both directions together with the temporal correlation within the readout. And this EPTI readout can be applied to pulse sequence that's sensitive to different contrasts or quantitative parameters. And in addition to the data correlation within the readout, we can also sample different case-based locations between different readouts to take advantage of the correlation between the readout as well for further acceleration. And with the high acquisition efficiency, it can achieve fast 3-minute whole brain scan at 1 millimeter isotropic resolution, and where images with different T1, T2, and T2 star contrasts are resolved, from which we can get whole brain quantum maps with very fast speed. Finally, EPTI can be applied to non-Cartesian sampling such as propella, spiral, or circular, and to address the common artifacts in these non-Cartesian sampling such as blurring, spiral, and provide multi-echo images. And with that, I want to summarize that EPTI is a flexible readout that can be applied to different applications to improve data quality and information content with high sampling efficiency. For questions and comments, feel free to contact me, and we're looking for talented people to join our team. Let me know if you're interested, and thanks to all the colleagues and collaborators at MGH and all the funding support. Thank you.